Hello, and welcome to the Friday Night Author Roundtable. I'm your host, Chris Baker, and during the next half hour, we'll be speaking with several very talented authors about their newly released books, what their inspiration was for creating their unique stories, and why it would be a great book to read and share with your friends and family. If you're like me and you love a great story of adventure with a lot of interesting characters, you're going to love this next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable. The book is called A Sailor's Yarn by author Gregory T. Goetterman Sr. from Christian Faith Publishing. Gregory, thanks for being on the show.
Well, you're welcome. I'm really glad to be here.
Now, tell everybody a bit about this story you've written.
Well, it is a faith-based story of a man's journey across the Great Lakes, wild adventures, but his struggle to grow to maturity and to find his value in a very large world. He learns about himself, he learns about faith, and in the meantime, they manage to burn down Mackinac City and fight pirates on Lake Erie and adopt a cat named Habibi.
Now, what inspired you to write this story? Where did that all kind of begin?
Well, I was raised around the Great Lakes, and I remember as a youth delivering newspapers and the headlines being about the Edmund Fitzgerald, the sinking of it. So I've always been fascinated by the Great Lakes, and with a military background, not Navy, but Army, it's always intrigued me. So I think that and the fact that it was a way to preach through the written word.
And of course, I got to imagine with the target audience, of course, myself, I live about 30 miles south of Lake Erie and grew up, hearing about the Edmund Fitzgerald with the great Gordon Lightfoot song. So this fascinates me. But who did you kind of have in mind as a target audience when you wrote this book?
My thought was that people that enjoyed a good adventure and laughter and really weren't faith-based yet. I put a lot of it between the lines and some of it open, very clearly open, and I hope to reach a few people.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to be able to see this book come to life on the page and to be able to have this to share with others?
It was terrific working with them. They are extremely competent. The lady that assisted me through the process was wonderful, very, very helpful, and I couldn't recommend them highly enough. They have done a great job for me.
Now, do you think this is something you might do again, maybe a sequel to this down the road, or anything else you're working on or thinking about writing about?
Well, the sequel's already written. I'm actually finishing my 6th novel now.
Ah, excellent. We'll look forward to more down the road. Now, this book, A Sailor's Yarn, when people read this, what do you hope is the most important message that they get from this book and this story?
That the world is a very large place, but there is a fellowship of man that crosses all nations, all political boundaries. And when that friendship, that kinship is based in the Lord, things can work out and be good.
That's such a fantastic message, and I think people are really going to love this book because it's a great book of adventure. Like I said, lots of interesting characters, and when you can tie that into a faith-based message, I think that just is all the more better for the reader. And like I said, this is the kind of book that's right up my alley. The book is called A Sailor's Yarn. I encourage everyone to pick up their copy today, of course, by author Gregory T. Goetterman Sr. from Christian Faith Publishing. Get your copy at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, as well as at the brick-and-mortar stores. And Gregory, thank you for being on the show.
Well, you're very welcome. I appreciate the call, and this has been a labor of love, so I'm very happy to do this.
Our next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable, a heartwarming book, and I think an inspiring book that I think kids and even parents are going to love. The book is called Mervyn the Church Mouse Learns to Pray by author Brynda Lattimore from Christian Faith Publishing. Brynda, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now tell everybody a little bit about this story.
The story is about Mervyn. He is a young mouse. He's very sheltered by being the youngest mouse in his group. And because of the stories he's heard from his friends about the building, he decides to just slip away from his mom and go and take a look for himself. And while he's out exploring the building, he comes upon a church, which is something that he knows nothing about, never seen before. And he is totally fascinated by what he's learning.
Now, what inspired you, one, to write this story and to create this character of Mervyn?
Well, I'm a foster mom, and a lot of children that come through my home, they don't attend church. They haven't attended church in the past. And I had a young man that went to church with me one Sunday morning, and he was totally blown away by the fact that his name was in the Bible. So it just dawned on me that, there are other children out here that probably feel the same way that this young man does, and they need to know that, God exists and prayers do work.
Now, who's this book geared towards? What kind of age range and who would you like to see this book get into the hands of?
Well, I think that any age, actually, I would say from 5 and up, and even parents, I think, would get a kick out of reading the book with their child.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to be able to see this book come to life on the page and to be able to share this story?
Oh, they were awesome. They were with me every step of the way. They weren't like some companies that just take your work and run with it. I had an input every step. Anything that I didn't like, I could change. Any, for the illustration, wording, what have you. And they were always in contact. They didn't just reach out to you and never come back. They were just there on a daily basis. And that just made it awesome, especially when I saw the finished book.
Now, have you thought about more stories, or do you think maybe you'd like to do like a series with Mervyn, or are you working on anything new?
Well, I'm kicking around some ideas, but yeah, I would love to make Mervyn a series, because there's just so much more out there that, kids can learn. And it doesn't have to be pushed down their throats, but made it interesting enough for them to come and ask questions.
Well, that's great. We look forward to more from Mervyn down the road. Now, this book, Mervyn, the Church Mouse, Learns to Pray. When kids read this, or even as you said, I think parents will enjoy it and could learn from it as well. But what do you hope is the most important message that comes across at the end of the day? That
no matter what the situation is, God is there, and all we need to do is just reach out to Him. He may not answer our prayer at that given moment, but He has a plan for us, and He's not going to just dismiss us. He's going to be there. We just need to learn how to reach out to Him in order to get that prayer answered.
Well, that's such a wonderful message that I think kids need to learn at a young age, and I think, we adults need to be reminded of that. So I think this is going to be the perfect vehicle to do just that. The book is called Mervyn the Church Mouse Learns to Pray by author Brynda Lattimore from Christian Faith Publishing. You can get your copy today, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, as well as at the brick-and-mortar stores, just a few of the locations. And Brynda, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable, I'm really interested to find out more about, because it's a wonderful collection of poems and stories and imagery and more, and I think it's got a great message. The book is called Healing from Heaven to You by author Xavier S. Bond from Christian Faith Publishing. Xavier, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. How you doing?
Good. Now, tell everybody a little bit about your book.
Well, it was inspired by some of the people I've met through my life and path for healing. First time I realized that God was going to use me in healing was back in 1987. He led me to a person who needed release from multiple sclerosis because he was really active into porn, and he was so locked up with the porn that he developed multiple sclerosis, believe it or not. And I said, well, I'm not here for cable, so I believe to pray for you, that God release you from your problem. And God did it right then and there. It was amazing. So I realized that God is leading me to a healing ministry. And the book came about from just different poems and songs I'd written over the years, and that's how it came about.
Where did the whole process start with, taking, these things you had written and this healing ministry that you'd kind of found yourself being led to? Where did it all just start that you decided, I'm going to put this in a book and share this? Where did that all kind of begin?
A couple of years ago, I had to an ad in a magazine about Christian faith, and I'd had my pile of poems and songs, and I'd been amassing them, and I just thought, well, I prayed about it, and God just led me to deal with them, so that's how it came about.
Who's the person that you really want to see this book get into the hands of?
Mostly people who have never been taught, about the Lord and that there is a Savior that can save us from this world, and anybody from ages, as soon as they can read to, can understand the power of the gospel. If they're old enough to understand that, they're old enough to understand this book. So anybody really from age, say, 8 to 80, 90, 100, 120, I don't know. Anybody really can understand this book.
Now, how was it for you working with Christian Faith Publishing to be able to share this and get this book out there?
Well, they liked the transcript, and they gave me a shot and a down payment, and I got into it. And it started, and we started editing everything, and it took almost 7-8 months to get everything ready, but when it was ready, it's just right. I went ahead and released it.
Now, is it something you might like to do again, maybe another collection down the road, or are you working on anything new?
Quite possibly, yeah. Part 2 probably going to be called Annapolis High School. I'm not sure yet, but it's quite a story, actually. It's going to be a little bit different than this one, but it'll be good, too.
Well, we look forward to that. Now this book, Healing from Heaven to You, when people read this, what do you hope is the most important message they get from reading this book?
Just trust in Jesus, trust in His Word. He says He will heal us, and He can fix anything because He made it. And so there's nothing He can't do if you trust Him. That's why we'll know that He is the healer.
Well, that's such an important message, an amazing message that we all need to hear. If people haven't heard it, they need to hear it. And if they have heard it, then we need to be reminded of that because, there's a lot of healing that needs to be done in this day and age. And there's only one place for that. And I think people are going to find, the source of that healing in this book. The book is called Healing from Heaven to You by author Xavier S. from Christian Faith Publishing. Get your copy today, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, as well as at the brick and mortar stores. And Xavier, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
This next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable, I'm really excited to find out more about because I think it's a book we can all in one way or another relate to. The book is called Dying for a Voice to be Heard by author Mary Baker from Christian Faith Publishing. Mary, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now tell everybody a little about your story.
My story is a journey to my life, whereas it deals with teenage pregnancy, depression, suicidal thoughts, people dying, people leaving, and I thought it would be a guide to young people to help them in their journey. Kids that lose hope, that are depressed, or thinking about suicide.
Now, what inspired you to tell your story? Because I got to imagine, it's probably very personal things that you write about. How was it being able to let all that out and to be able to share this?
Well, I'm very passionate about helping people, and it took 5 years to get it all together, but I'm so passionate about helping and reaching out and have a tool that will last for years in and years out, for decades, that could help people.
And as you said, you kind of want the young kids, the young people to get a hold of this. But I have to imagine this is really the kind of book that a lot of people of all age ranges could relate to in one way or another and be helped in one way or another. Is that kind of what you had in mind? This is a book really for everybody?
Yes.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to get this book published and to be able to share this message?
It was very exciting. The facilitation of Christian Faith was very easy. They worked really well with me. It was just a blessing to have them as a publisher.
Now, is this something you might like to do again, maybe a sequel to this, or do you have anything else you'd like to write about?
Yes, my next book would be about 50 to Life with No Redemption. It's about a 17-year-old that got life for double homicide, but he didn't do it. So I'm pretty much trying to get this book out and try to get some advocates to try to help his case because he's been there since like 20 years now.
Oh, wow. That it sounds like a fascinating story. And then, of course, any situation like that is heartbreaking. And hopefully, we'll get to talk about that in the near future. Now this book, Dying for a Voice to be Heard, when people read this, what do you hope is the most important message they get? So the most important thing they gain from reading your book?
To never lose hope. And there's always a bright light at the end. And to believe in themselves. And that's all that matters.
That's such a fantastic message, and it's a message we all need to hear at some point in our life or another, and I think they're going to find that sort of hope in this book and a whole lot more. The book is called Dying for a Voice to be Heard by author Mary Baker from Christian Faith Publishing. You can get your copy today, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, the brick and mortar stores. Those are just a handful of the locations. And Mary, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
For those that feel like they're in a hopeless situation, there is hope, and I think that's at the heart of our next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable. The book is called Where Shine Only the Stars by author Thomas Lee from Christian Faith Publishing. Thomas, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Now tell everybody about your book and about your story.
It's my autobiography, and I started in 1990. God put that on my heart, and then I went through 5 writers, and I finally got it completed. But both my parents I lost to suicide, and countless relatives and friends. And I just want to convey the message that there's hope, because I met Jesus when I was 28. I was a drug addict and alcoholic and abusive, but I thought that, because of my parents, I had to follow suit, but that's not true, because we have hope in Jesus, and so many people are lost to the wayside, and they're not able to have salvation. But you can have hope and happiness and salvation, and it says in the Bible that, behold, all things pass away and all things become new, and that's true. And so many people, they just don't get the word. They just don't understand. They think that that's their station in life, but in fact, it's not, because God has a plan for everyone.
Now, what inspired you to tell your story and to put this in a book and share it?
I just thought that I might be able to reach those who are lost, because if they look at my situation, they can draw a comparison and say, hey, you know what? He went through all that madness, and yet he was able to rise above. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do it without Jesus, but I just want them to know that all things are possible through Christ who strengthens me, and that goes for everyone, not just for people who were raised and they weren't dysfunctional. It goes for everyone who was abused or whatever your situation is. I just see so many people who don't find Jesus, and then they step off into eternity without salvation. And the whole message is hope and the promise of salvation. And that's for everyone, not just for the certain few.
Now, how was it working with Christian Faith Publishing to get this book published and to be able to share this message of yours?
Well, they were real helpful. I had, it's my first book and everything, and I'm glad I went with that company. They're good people.
And of course, you said this is your first book. Working on anything new? Do you think there's anything down the road that you'd like to write about?
Well, I'm going to write a comic book. I'm going to write a Christian comic book. I don't know if I'm going to write any more books. God really hasn't put that on my heart yet. But if I do, I'll go with the same people, and they were a great help, and I was just so happy to have it done, because it was some 26 years in the making, and it's been a rare privilege, I must say.
Well, if we get to see more down the road from you, we look forward to that, if God lays that on your heart. Now, this book, Where Shine Only the Stars, this, to me, it seems like it's the kind of a book that everybody could find something to latch onto, because everyone, they go through different things, but we all need that hope. Is that kind of what you had in mind when you wrote this, that this is really the kind of book that anybody is going to really learn a lot from? I
think so, because everyone goes through certain situations, and sometimes they think it's hopeless, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's powerful, and I think it could help just about any person in certain situations, and that's what I was hoping to do, is just go out and touch people's hearts and strengthen their faith if they're already saved, and if they're not, just to come to Him and realize that He's the only hope, because going through life without Jesus is, I don't know, I did it, and it was not fun. So now I'm on track, and it's just a book of hope, and I just hope that it touches people's hearts, and I think it will.
And I think you may have touched on it a little bit there, but if you could say there's one overall message that you hope people get, what do you hope people gain from this book?
I just hope that people realize that we can do all things through Jesus, and nothing is too big for God, and no matter the predicament, God can help you with that, because He's always right. He's almighty, and He loves us, and He wants to see us prosper. He doesn't want to see us go through life dragging our knuckles. He wants to see us prosperous and happy, and that's part of the Christian life. And I just hope to convey that, and people understand the message I'm trying to put across.
Well, I tell you what, that's a wonderful message. And in a world where hope seems in short supply sometimes, there is hope in the Lord. And I think this book is going to really help, help people to realize that. And I encourage everyone to pick up their copy. The book is called Where Shine Only the Stars by author Thomas Lee from Christian Faith Publishing. Get your copy today, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, online, as well as the brick and mortar stores, a handful of the locations. And Thomas, thank you for being on the show.
God bless you, sir, and you have a pleasant day. Thank you.
Our next book on the Friday Night Author Roundtable, going to be a fascinating read. I think a fun read for both children and adults. Everybody's going to love this. The book is called Larry and the Red Fox by author Daniel Burruss from Fulton Books. Daniel, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now tell everybody a little about your story.
All right. The story is about a hunter that goes out into the mountains to get away from the stress of his job in the city, and he sees a fox lay down on a rock, which is quite unusual in the daytime, and he decides he'd see how close he could get to him, and then before he does, he says, well, maybe I can catch it. And he picks up his bag and goes over, and he catches the fox. And he's telling him, "Old fox, you're the dumbest fox I ever seen in my life." And that's when the fox starts talking back to him, and it's a battle of wits from there on out.
Now, what inspired you to write this story?
My wife has a little cousin in Kentucky, a little girl that was 7 years old, and she wanted letters. She loved to go to the mailbox and get mail, and her father was going to put her on a junk mail list. And I said, no, I'll write to her. So I started writing, and it doesn't take you long out here in the country to run out of things to write about. So I started making up stories, and because I was writing to her every week, I would just write one sheet on a notebook paper, and once I got the sheet filled, I'd end it and send it. And with Larry and the Red Fox, I hadn't intended to publish a book, but the story went on so long, I had so many letters and notes that I decided I'm going to see if I can put this all into one story. And as I did it, I ended up with this story, so quite by chance.
That's one of the things I love about doing this show is finding out the story behind the story like that. That to me is one of the more fascinating aspects of it.
Yes, and so I wasn't really inspired. I just wrote to a little girl to entertain her, that I thought maybe this would make a story that I could share with other children and they get a laugh out of it and enjoy it. So I wasn't, I didn't really have an inspiration to do it. It sort of evolved. And so I decided I wanted to do it. I'm happy with life. I'm happy with what I got, and I don't need anything. And I wrote it in the book that all the proceeds, all the royalties that I get, I'm going to put in a children's charity. I plan to get to St. Jude's and muscular dystrophy and maybe the Smiles program. I don't plan to keep a penny or a dime for myself.
Oh, wow, that's great. Now, what kind of age range did you have in mind for this book? Or like I said, as I said earlier, I think this is really kind of a book that kids and adults are going to enjoy. Did you have that in mind, that really this is a book anyone's going to love?
Yes, I kind of thought for a child to read it, it'd probably be 8 years old, 8 to maybe 12. I really think that the grandparents, older people seem to like the book. I've had quite a few older people read it, and I think that they will enjoy reading it to their grandchildren or their children. So I was thinking that young kids would read it, maybe 8 to 12, but I'm really hopeful that the elderly or the adults in the audience will like to read it to, children or grandchildren.
Now, how was it working with Fulton Books to be able to see your book come to life on the page and to be able to share it?
To hold the book in my hand was a real joy. But the greatest thrill to me, what made it real, was when I looked on Amazon and saw it for sale. And, the books that they published and sent me is between me and them, and I'm holding the book. When I went on Amazon, I said it's for everybody. Anyone can go on Amazon and see it and purchase it. And that really was a thrill for me to see it on Amazon.
Now, have you thought about maybe doing this again, another book about Larry and the Red Fox, or do you have anything new you'd like to write about?
I have several ideas because I wrote to the little girl. I made up all kinds of stories for her, and some of them I think have potential. And so I have an old computer, and I'm writing on about 4 different ones at a time. I put them aside, and I go back over them when it'll be kind of new again, and I read them and try to see if I can't make improvements in the storyline and make it more interesting and be more descriptive, that sort of thing.
When people read this, whether it's kids or grandparents or parents reading it too and with kids, when people read Larry and the Red Fox, what do you hope is the most important message they get?
Well, I hope it would encourage them to maybe go out and enjoy nature. And in the story, Larry the hunter, he's very conscientious. When he takes something out into the woods, whether it's his lunch in a lunch bag, he brings it back out. So I think it has some pretty good principles as far as the hunter. And, I like the way I ended the story, and a lot of adults seem to like the last few lines in it.
Well, I think this is, to me, I think going to be a fun read for all who read it. The book is called Larry and the Red Fox by author Daniel Burruss from Fulton Books. You can get your copy today, and I encourage everyone, pick yours up. You can do that at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Google Play, online, as well as at the brick and mortar stores. And Daniel, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Friday Night Author Roundtable. We'll be back next week with another great group of talented authors to discuss their books, their process, and their accomplishments. Have a great weekend, everyone.